Your stories heard. This is Undeterred. Live! Podcast streaming on Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast. Stories heard. This is Undeterred. Undeterred by Ken. Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of Undeterred by Ken. Okay, so napakabilis ng ating week, magbabalik na ulit tayo. Last week, the past few days, I discussed about NSTP and what sets it apart from, or what sets NSTP or taking NSTP and UP Diliman compared to other universities, right? So ngayon, ang pag-uusapan naman natin ay understanding the self and others. So what do I mean by that? So by understanding the self and others, it begs to ask, or we will answer several questions, such as number one, of course, we need to know what is the self. Ayan. Definition, what is the self? Ano ba yung self? And of course, why is it important to know the self? Siyempre, of course, it makes sense. And then number three, we will talk about different conceptions of the self. Ayan. And then, lastly, of course, what can we do as students, diba? After knowing all of that, after knowing what the self is, what its function, and how we react to our community, environment, and whatever, using our understanding of ourselves, what can we do now as students, diba? For nation building using that learning, diba? So yeah, hindi na tayo magpapatumpik-tumpik pa. Boom, kara-karaka na. Intindihin na natin. Okay, so una, ang tanong, what is the self? Sabi kasi dito, the self is formed in relation to other people. So, ano ibig sabihin nun, Ken? Ibig sabihin kung ano ako, this is somewhat related to other people. Tama ba yun? Is myself connected or interrelated to the other person you're, say for example, communicating with? Diba? Well, to answer that, kasi dito, ang sabi, the self is your perception of you. Okay? So, this is how you see yourself as. Do you see yourself as beautiful? Or whatever, diba? So, dun tayo magsisimula. In order for you to understand yourself, you need to answer one question first. And that question is, who am I? Diba? We can answer this question very, very easily by following our daily lives. Diba? Sa ating pang-araw-araw na pamumuhay, meron tayong mga trivial ways on how to live our daily lives, diba? From the decisions we make, from, say for example, smaller things like getting up in the morning, what time should I set my alarm clock, diba? Bago tayo matulog, para malaman natin kung kailan tayo magigising. Pagkagising natin, ano bang breakfast ang gusto nating lutuin? Gusto ko ba ng sunny side up egg? Gusto ko ba ng hard-boiled egg? Gusto ko ba ng scrambled egg? Over easy ba yung pagkakaluto? Gusto ko ba ng fully cooked, diba? The things, those small things, up until to the bigger things. So, the way you look at yourself and whom to follow also reflects who you are as a person. So, ibig sabihin kung paano mo rin tignan yung sarili mo at saka kung sino rin mga fina-follow mo. So, for example, kung sino ka, parang it's also a reflection of who are the people you follow. Say, for example, sa social media, diba? Hindi ko sinasabi na pag finalo mo si Kylie Jenner, magiging kamukha mo si Kylie Jenner, ah. Pero, that also reflects who you are, diba? Somewhat. Okay, so that is your perception of what a beautiful woman looks like. So, somewhat, you're aiming that standard that you're setting to yourself also reflected to who you are following. So, ganun din pala kalalim yun. So, yes, to answer that question, diba? Who you are really is dependent and really somewhat related to other people. Now, sabi rin dito, knowing the self is about branding, diba? We always see that sa panahon ngayon, diba? Sa social media. Brand ambassadors, sabihin pa natin mga social media influencers, diba? They are curating their own brand using their social media. Meaning, yung identity nila is nabuo through their branding. And ganun din sa pag-identify natin ng ating sarili, ng ating self, 'di ba? We are curating our own brand. We are creating our identity by deciding what things to do, what things to post, 'di ba? O parang pag nag-react ka ba ng political somewhat sa iyong social media, is that you? Is that the brand that you want to that you are creating for yourself, 'di ba? And these are our ways to manage other people's perception of us. And that is making who we are as an individual. So what is the self? That's the answer. So number 2, why is it important for us to know the self? Ano bang importansya nan, Ken? Bakit ba natin kailangan kilalanin kung sino tayo? Kasi ang sabi dito, 'di ba? Only when you understand yourself can you understand the society, and this works vice versa as well. Ano bang ibig sabihin nun? Ang ibig sabihin lang nun basically is understanding who we are helps us identify the role, kung ano yung magiging role natin, di ba? The role that we are going to play, di ba, sa society. So, yun pala yung importansya nun. Kung hindi natin kilala kung sino tayo, hindi natin malalaman kung ano yung pwede natin iambag sa ating lipunan. So, ganun lang siya kasimple, pero ganun din siya kaimportante. Kasi makikita natin kung hindi natin kilala yung sarili natin, no, I don't have this capability, I don't trust myself to do these things. We can't extend our help, diba, towards our community, towards our society when we are needed the most. So, that is one important thing to know why knowing the self is important, if that makes any sense. So, yeah. Simply put, diba, this is how we are going to contribute. Simply put, understanding yourself is already a contribution to society by itself. So, pag tinanong ka na sa social media, diba, so, pag nakipag-keyboard warrior ka dyan, kung ano ang political faction. So, pag tinanong, ano bang ambag mo? Well, kilala ko yung sarili ko, and that's your primary, quote-unquote, ambag sa society. So, yeah. Yun din, knowing yourself, diba? Pag sinabi mong, I know myself, and doing that, parang when you say that to yourself loudly, parang alam mo agad, diba? These are my tendencies. I know myself na pag binuksan ko yung isang box ng cream dyan, kakainin ko lahat yan. Hindi ko mapipigilan yung sarili ko na hindi yung kainin lahat. Knowing yourself na ganun ka pala, diba? You also know your tendencies na ubusin yung isang box ng cream na yon. Diba? So, from those simple things to the bigger things, it piles up, and that makes you who you are. Diba? And if you understand again the self and the society, you can make decisions to benefit the community more effectively. So, magiging malaki yung ambag ng pagkilala mo sa sarili mo kung ano yung magiging ambag mo sa society mo. So, that's very easy again. Number 2 question, we already answered that. Okay, punta naman tayo sa number 3. Dito ako medyo mas excited to discuss kasi ang dami pala nating mga facets of selves, diba? Marami, plural. So, ang una dito, sabi, ano ba yung different conceptions of self, rather. So, an essential part of being, ito yung ibig sabihin daw ng mga conceptions ng ating sarili. Pero it is essential, diba? And it is also natural. So, we think, diba, sometimes, we think that even babies have a personality. Parang, itong batang to, pala iyakin itong batang to. Itong batang to, hindi siya masyado nagpapakarga. Ganyan. So, kung narinig nyo na yun sa mga parents nyo before, diba, that alone stands as a conception of your early self, diba? Parang, ako, nung baby pala ako, iyakin pala ako. Nung baby pala ako, mahilig pala akong kumagat ng mga chupon, ganyan. So, nagsisimula tayo sa earliest form of ourselves during our childhood, during our, yung baby pa tayo. So, nakikita natin na it is natural. So, paano naman siya naging essential? Diba may sinasabi tayo na there is a true and unified self. Ibig sabihin, meron totoo at saka yung sarili mo. So, ibig sabihin, yung challenge nito, ang problema kasi dito usually, pag habang kinikilala pa lang natin yung sarili natin, mahirap. Sabi, paano ba natin kikilalanin yung sarili natin? Hahanapin ko muna yung sarili ko, di ba? Yung nakikita natin. Hindi naman sa ang tawag dito, parang sobrang lost mo or whatever, di ba? When you say that, hahanapin ko muna yung sarili mo, parang kikilalanin mo muna yung sarili mo. It's a soul searching. Parang nagkakano na soul searching, di ba? Sa tingin ko, may associate natin ito siguro in a para mas maintindihan ng lahat ng mga nanonood sa akin 3 listeners. Paano pa natin i-materialize yung idea na ito, yung there is a true and unified self? 'Di ba sa LGBTQ community, 'di ba? They have a process that they call, or what we call, the coming out process. And in the LGBT community, we can somewhat relate this through that process. It is who they are. It is who we are. 'Di ba? That is how we identify ourselves as. 'Di ba? So that is another conception of yourself. Your true and unified self. This is who you are, and this is who you identify as, and that is what you're going to represent from then on after you're coming out. So that's one. So ano pa ba yung mga conception of self, Ken? So sabi dito, the role that people occupy makes them who they really are. So ano ba ibig sabihin nito? Ano ba yung mga roles na yan, Ken? So say for example, your role, the role that you're playing in, say for example, the community, your workplace, 'di ba? Your say for example, your educational degree, 'di ba? And sometimes even in the family, your roles in the family, ano ka ba? Panganay ka ba? Tatay, head of the family ka ba? Nanay ka ba? And sometimes, isa pa, even your fandoms, 'di ba? Are you a BTS fan? Are you an ARMY? Are you ano pa ba yung mga sikat na ngayon, na mga fandoms ngayon? Pero those things, 'di ba? Those roles, 'di ba, that you play in the society, that makes you who you are as well. Pag tinanong ka sa community, say for example sa iyong simbahan, 'di ba? Couples for Christ. Who are you? Siyempre, pag tinanong ka gano'n, may meet and greet kayo with your group. When you introduce yourself, for example, sa workplace, 'di ba? Pag sa BPO, pag tinanong ka, can you introduce yourself? Can you tell us about yourself? Eh di ang sasabihin mo agad, how long have you been in the industry? What companies you work for? So those are the roles that you play. And ngayon, 'di ba, back to school na tayo ngayon, face to face na tayo. When you introduce yourself in the classroom setting, 'di ba? You say your name, you say your age, and then if nakapag-aral ka na before sa ibang university, what courses you took, 'di ba? So those things, and those are roles that we are playing in our community. And this is also a component of ourselves, and this is how we conceive ourselves. So yeah, those things. So again, the self is always in relation to other people, just like that. So ano ibig sabihin nito? You can't be, say for example, yung kanina sa BTS, 'di ba? You can't be a BTS fan. You can't be identified as a BTS fan if yung BTS fan na yun, if yung BTS group na yun is not existing, 'di ba? So yung kung yung Korean popular group na BTS is hindi naman nag-e-exist, 'di ba? Hindi mo pwede sabihin na ay BTS ako. Ano yung BTS? Behind the scene. ang corny ko, pero pagpasensyahan niyo na ako. Pero yun, ganun siya kasimple ilalatag, 'di ba? Ibig sabihin lang dito, yung role mo as an ARMY is again really dependent on the existence of the BTS group. So kung hindi naman nag-e-exist yung school na yun, pwede mo ba sabihin na ay taga-UP ako, ganyan. So hindi mo pwede matawag na sarili mong ganun. So ganun siya kasimple. And another one, ito yung pinaka nagustuhan ko naman dito sa aming dito sa common module na to, yung understanding the self. Ang sabi kasi dito, I'm a theater arts student, 'di ba? Ang sabi dito, who we are is a performance. Ano ba ibig sabihin nito? Sabi ito kasi yung definition na kinoin ni Irving Goffman in his dramaturgy research. So sabi niya, like in theater, we have a front stage. And ano yung front stage na yon? This is where we perform daily. This is where we uphold our roles. So yung mga roles na sinabi natin kanina, those are the roles that we are playing and performing in our everyday lives, 'di ba? So for example, you are a teacher. As a teacher, you perform as somebody who is professional, 'di ba? Resourceful, energetic. Pero ang underlying attitude or underlying performance mo lagi is dapat proper, 'di ba? Dapat lagi kang uptight kasi teacher ka, hindi ka pwedeng bungis-ngis, 'di ba? Hindi ka pwedeng scandalous na teacher, 'di ba? So, yun yung yun yung meron kang role na pine-perform every day as a teacher. And ano naman yung backstage? And backstage naman sabi, this is the space where only trusted people can see you as you are. 'Di ba? As a teacher, hindi mo naman pwedeng ipangkalandakan dyan na ayun, 'di ba? Ngayon kasi medyo nagbabago yung nagkakaroon na ng TikTok account, pero earlier in our earlier days, 'di ba? Pag nakita mo si teacher na medyo sexy, medyo hubad-hubadera, may kita mo ay teacher pa man din siya. Ganun siya manamit. Yun, may judgment agad. And those are the things that we ourselves, 'di ba? Parang paano naman natin i-express yung individuality natin without being judged by the other people na nakikita tayo dun sa ating front stage. We do and we create a backstage. This is a space where only trusted people can see ourselves. Kaya nga nagkakaroon tayo ngayon ng mga alter accounts, 'di ba? These are spaces which is more relaxed or more intimate. Siguro that's the proper term. It's a more intimate space, or sometimes these are spaces that we will not be afraid to show who we really are kasi there are no people who will think us as scandalous, and there is no judgment na maaasahan natin dahil hindi na unang-una itong space na na-create natin, hindi naman tayo kilala halos ng mga tao na nandoon, 'di ba? So ililimit natin kung sino lang yung mga nakakita doon. So that is why itong definition na ito ni Irving Goffman makes sense. Kasi hindi naman tayo nagkakaroon ng parang double-faceted life, 'di ba? Parang meron kang isang pinafront, meron kang isang tinatago. Pero somewhat nake-create natin yung other version of ourselves na yun. Kasi we consider that space as a safe space. Very easy. So, meron din siyang diniscuss about areas of the self. So, there are 4. One is yung public. This is the open area, yung katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, yung front stage. And then there is also a blind area, which is you're not aware. These are the things that you are not aware about yourself, pero pine-perform mo rin siya daily. This is why it's called a blind area. So for example, your mannerisms. So yung mga mannerisms mo. So for example, if you're always mahilig ka sa fillers, ganyan, mga like, mga ganyan. So, yung mga mannerisms mo, those are the blind area of yourself. And then, of course, the private or your hidden area. This is, again, the self that only you know about. And this comprises your deepest, darkest secrets. And lastly, yung unknown area. So, napag-usapan natin kanina yung finding who you really are. So, somewhat, the unknown area, di ba sabi nga nila, yung self mo, hindi nagbabago. That is yourself from simula nung pagkabata mo hanggang pagtanda mo. Yung journey of life is finding out who you really are, and the unknown area is somewhat connected to finding the true self, finding your true self. So once na find out mo na yung true self, mawawala na yung unknown area na yun, and good for you because you have found out who you really are, diba? And it is now under your own decision if you're going to keep it open or private. So that's how the areas of self work. Now, meron naman tayong isa pang way on how we conceive ourselves. Number 1, sabi dito kasi, there is an idea of the I and the me. So, me, myself, and I. So, yan, me, I, and me. Ano ba yung pagkakaiba nilang dalawa, Ken? So, sabi dito, based on the theory, we have a conformist self and also a rule breaker self. Diba? Meron tayong conformist self, yung parang oo ng oo, tas meron din naman tayong rule breaker self na no, I don't want to do that. Don't dictate me. You're not the boss of me. Parang gano'n, diba? Very powerful yun. Pero that is correct. That is true. So we choose who to employ in different situations. So for example, your intentional self, your I self, yung I self mo is very intentional. Pag sinabing ganito yung rules, ganito yung conventions, you will follow that rule, you will follow that convention, hindi ka lilihis, 'di ba? So usually, saan natin nakikita to sa government agencies, 'di ba? We will behave ourselves pag nakapila tayo doon. Ano pa ba? Sa school, pag nasa church tayo, 'di ba? Ang mangingibabaw na sarili mo is yung intentional self mo, because you know that again, ang pangit, 'di ba? Kasi parang iniisip agad natin, people will easily pass judgment to us pag medyo lumihis tayo dun sa ordinary or dun sa nakasanayan, sa standards, sa rules, sa convention. Pero that's true. That's why we have our intentional self and then the conformist self. So yung me naman, yung ating rule breaker self, 'di ba? Doon naman natin nakikita na medyo lalayo naman tayo ng nakasanayan. So yung ating rule breaker self, parang these are the times that we choose to break boundaries, 'di ba? Break the glass ceiling. Parang okay, I think I'm courageous to try something new right now. Parang ganyan. So again, it really depends on what type of self you want to employ in varying situations. So again, we use them in varying decision-making degrees. So, yun lang yung pagkakaiba nila ng I and ni me. So, who are you? Paggising mo sa umaga, hindi mo naman tatanungin yung sarili mo, 'di ba? Parang, okay, parang I want to be a rule breaker right now. Parang today is the day para mag-break tayo ng ceilings and boundaries. Parang ganyan. So, nakakatulong din siya somewhat, 'di ba, sa ating mga decisions in our daily lives. So, ayun, parang yung I self mo yung straight edge, 'di ba? Tapos yung me self mo yung mga rebel self mo. Ganyan. So, ano pa? Meron pang other ways for us to conceive ourselves. Of course, the self varies depending on our relationship with other people. So, kung kanina may roles tayo, meron naman tayo ngayong relationship with other people. So, what does it mean? Who am I is who I think you think I am. Medyo magulo ba? So, kung ano daw ako, ito daw ay dahil sa kung ano yung tingin ko na tingin mo sa akin. So, this is how we see ourselves based on other people's reaction to our role, to our function, to our performance. So, ang binigay kasi na example dito is yung teacher na nagtuturo and yung estudyante niya na tango lang ng tango sa kanya. 'Di ba? Feeling ng teacher, yes, ang galing mo magturo, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, ang galing mo magturo. So yung teacher, feeling niya, oh shit, ang galing-galing ko magturo, tango ng tango yung mga students ko, without knowing na sa internal self pala ng bata, tango lang ng tango kasi hindi nga niya maintindihan. Sige na lang, ma'am, tuloy-tuloy mo na lang. Parang, okay, so there is a big difference, 'di ba? How other people see us and how you see other people and how you see yourself after seeing the reaction of other people, you doing your action and role and your function and your performance every day. So, we need to be very, ang tawag dito, medyo i-assess natin siguro dapat yung mga reactions and how we perceive other people's perception of us. Yan. So, we manage that continuously in our day-to-day. And another one, ito naman medyo eye-opening ito for me, 'di ba? Sabi kasi, we conceive ourselves in a matter of capitalist activities. So meaning the self is maintained through those capitalist activities. So na-mention ko na kasi to before sa aking film class, 'di ba? And sa aking theory class sa history, sa theater history class, na yung consumption ng tao, siya yung nagda-drive sa kung paano tayo nabubuhay dito sa mundo or paano na-define kung sino tayo, 'di ba? Katulad ng mga yung nangyaring colonialism sa atin before, 'di ba? Kasi nga naghahanap sila ng spice, naghahanap sila ng resources, kaya napunta rito sa Asia, 'di ba? Sila Magellan and whatnot. So kailangan nila maghanap ng ibang paraan para makapunta sa isang lugar. And accidentally, because of that, yung consumption kasi yun eh. Yung consumption yung driver ng kanilang ng activities nila. yung capitalist activities na yon. So, ganun din pala sa sarili natin. How we are maintained through capitalist activities, di ba? So, yung consumption mo, dinedefine pala nun kung sino ka. Ganun siya kasimple. Paano ba natin sinasabi, Ken, paano ba natin na-define yung sarili natin kung sino tayo sa pamamagitan lang ng pagkonsumo? Well, this is done simply by spending, di ba? So, the products that you use, how much they cost, even the brands or somewhat lack thereof of brands, di ba? If particular ka sa Chanel, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, di ba? Or even sometimes yung mga knockoffs, di ba? That tells us who you are. Di ba? O somewhat sa mga technology na ginagamit natin, if you are an Android user, di ba? From head to toe, may Samsung watch, 'di ba? May tablet, 'di ba? Tapos meron kang glass, ganyan. So, that tells us who you are versus yung mga Apple users na very minimalist, para wow, very sleek design, tapos simple lang, no cords, no etc. Simple Apple. Ganyan, 'di ba? So, nakikita natin kung anong klaseng tao ba itong mga 'to. So 'yon. So, the things that we spend on is a symbol of who we are and our capabilities. Kasi hindi lang naman, di ba, katulad nun, yung sabi Android is cheaper than Apple. Parang, wala naman masyadong pinagkaiba. Usually, mas marami pang ang functions yung Android kaysa sa Apple. So, yung capabilities, may kita natin, okay, mas kaya niya palang mag-spend ng more money on technology, di ba, in comparison to other people na Android user lang. Di ba? Nagkakaroon agad tayo ng judgment na mas mahirap yung isa kasi Android phone lang yung gamit niya kaysa dun sa isang Apple iPhone 13 Pro Max bayad ng cash. Di ba? Ganon. So, makikita natin na yung nagda-drive talaga kung sino tayo is yung capitalist activities all around us. Di ba? At saka yung isa pa, most of the capitalist, with the capitalist mindset, ano ba ibinebenta nila? Hindi nila ibinebenta yung kanilang product, 'di ba? Hindi nila sinasabi na, hey, bumili ka ng iPhone. No, when we see commercials, adverts, 'di ba? Makita natin na they are selling personality sleek design for your professional needs, 'di ba? O for example, yung Louboutin na shoes, 'di ba? Pag nakita tayo ng red sole, makita natin agad, okay, yeah, based from other people's interviews, 'di ba, sa mga celebrities, 'di ba? Sabi nila, it symbolizes that you are a go-getter, 'di ba? You are a strong independent woman. So pag strong independent woman ka, dapat ang shoes mo daw Louboutin, 'di ba? So, okay, ganun pala 'yon. So, if I want to be a strong independent woman, if I want to be a go-getter individual, kailangan may Louboutin ako. Pag wala akong Louboutin, napag-iiwanan ako. So, ganon dinadrive ng capitalist activities kung sino tayo, 'di ba? So, yeah, that's a very interesting take for me kasi that is also a concept not very foreign for me. Kasi nga nasabi ko na rin sa inyo na napag-usapan na rin namin ito ng mga professors ko before sa film at saka sa aking history class before. So, yeah, the self naman, sabi dito, is also a product of hegemonic discourses. So, ano ba ibig sabihin ito? So, there are two ngayon kasi there are two dominant discourses of society. And one of them, and those two is based either on gender or class. O, diba? Social class and gender. So, those two public discourse or hegemonic discourses are the dominant discourses in our society. And those somewhat partly defines who we are. O, diba? Pag sinabing, because of your gender and of your class, you are afforded varying privileges. Pag sinabing babae ka, marami kang pwedeng gawin, pero mas marami ka rin pwedeng hindi gawin, di ba? Tulad ng pagdadamit ng mas maiikli, mga labas yung mga dibdib. Na-judge kasi tayo. As a society, we are a very judgmental society. And most of the time, those dominant discourses, yung gender and class, it dictates how we see ourselves as. So, kung alam nating babae tayo, hindi naman tayo pwedeng, dahil nga sa society and how society sees us, mas pipiliin na lang natin, 'di ba, na magdamit ng prim and proper, hindi tayo masyadong bold sa ating mga choices in our clothing, 'di ba? So those dictate somewhat, unfortunately, ang pangit mong pakinggan, pero this is still happening sa aking English 13 class nga. This is one of the key topics that we discussed, yung toxic masculinity, 'di ba? At saka yung femininity, masculinity, and how we treat people around us because of their gender. So sabi ko nga rin, these discourses, they afforded us varying privileges. 'Di ba? Pagkatulad ng sinabi ko kanina, nakita natin yung race, 'di ba, sa America. Nakita natin yung race. It's a very compelling discourse sa society na talaga namang nagse-separate ng kanilang mga privileges, what can they do and how other people see them and treat them. And those discourses dictates kung sino rin sila. So, makikita natin, 'di ba, mas pinapanigan yung mga white male compared to black female and marami pang iba. So, yun, doon nakikita na these dominant categories carry different privileges in the society and how you see yourselves. Lastly, sabi dito, the self is seen as inherently connected to other people. I think we've established this earlier on in the discussion na yes, somewhat we are interconnected with each other. Our self is somewhat related to other people. Pero paano pa ba natin yun mas mapapalalim? Dito papasok yung yung sinasabi natin, di ba? Sa edukasyon ng pagpapahalaga, tama ba? EP, yes, values education, yung pakikipagkapwa. Somewhat, this is connected culturally, di ba? Yung ating pakikipagkapwa, this is centered in our empathy as Filipinos and how you treat other people based on how you would like to connect to them. So, hindi mo naman tatratuhin na loko-lokohin mo lang, 'di ba, yung ninang mo, 'di ba? Pag nakita mo yung ninang mo, anong gagawin mo agad? Okay, ninang, abutin mo yung kamay, mano po, ganyan. 'Di ba, may mga po ka pa. So, and yeah, that also is telling of who you are. Anong klase kang inaanak, 'di ba? So, we are connected to other people and you would react and you would treat other people based on how you would like to connect to them. Yun. So, mabait ka ba? 'Di ba? Hence, this is how you treat other people. And it shows your intention. Sabi nga dito, ito yung keyword yung intention mo. So, yung intention pala ng inaanak, kaya pala siya nagmano doon sa nina niya is dahil magpapasko na, kailangan niya ng makakubra. Ayan. So, yun. So, wag tayong ganon, 'di ba? So, again, you as yourself, 'di ba, dapat ginagawa mo talaga yon. Pero natawa ako dun sa example ko. Talagang I hit the yung meaning nito, inherently connected to other people. Pero yeah, 'di ba? Parang nakakatuwa lang na may iba't ibang degrees talaga tayo ng self. And punta naman tayo sa number 4 question. So now that we know ourselves, how we conceive ourselves, what are the layer of ourselves, 'di ba? And how we can contribute by simply knowing ourselves in the society, what can we do as students for nation building? That's the question. So, balik tayo dun sa Tatak UPD NSTP. Sabi dito kasi, you uphold your scholar ng bayan identity. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to uphold our quote-unquote scholar ng bayan identities, diba? Kasi meron 2 facets ito. Number 1, yung scholar ng bayan, diba? You are aware. Ito yung ibig sabihin nito. You are aware that who you are as an scholar is because of the nation. It is because of the nation. Without the nation, you cannot be called as scholar ng bayan. Now, magva-vary naman yung definition nito. Pag sinabing scholar para sa bayan. Ayan, di ba? So, ibig sabihin nito, who you are as an scholar is dedicated to the community who you are bound to serve. Ibig sabihin, whatever service that you can give, it is always for the bayan. It's for whoever is your beneficiary in the community, in the society. So, ganun pala yon. So, that is what we can do and how we can contribute to our nation by simply knowing, di ba? by defining ourselves. Are we scholar ng bayan or are we scholar para sa bayan? So, parang yung isa medyo passive siya, diba? Tapos yung isa medyo active. So, nakakatuwa na by just changing one keyword in the definition, diba? Parang nagkakaroon talaga ng mas deeper meaning and mas deeper understanding on what your function and your purpose as a student, as an isko. So, di ba, ngayon, alam na natin na we are scholar ng bayan or we are scholar para sa bayan. What are we going to do? Number one, we need to maximize the resources that we are getting from the bayan. So, we know that wasting time and resources in UP, this constitutes equivalent to wasting taxes of the people. And nakakahiya yun, di ba? Paaral ka na nga ng taong bayan. Hindi tayo paaral ng gobyerno. Paaral tayo ng taong bayan. We know now, kailangan natin maging self-aware, di ba? Nagkakaroon tayo ng sense of self-awareness, again, as an scholar ng bayan, para hindi tayo lumiban sa klase, hindi tayo magpabagsak na lang, di ba? Hindi tayo makakuha ng DRP, or yung mga INC natin, kailangan talaga natin balikan para talaga mabigyan tayo ng grade at makomplete natin. So, yun, those things are drivers, di ba? For us to become better students. And when we become better students, we hence can become better leaders for our nation building, di ba? So, meron tayong nation building capability once we graduated from UP. So, yun pala yun. That is how understanding self and others help as an isko. So for me, that just makes sense, di ba? Yung different facets of your of yourself, di ba? Yung different sides of yourself. Ang laki pala ng tulong niya sa pagkilala mo rin talaga sa sarili mo. Tsaka kung ano yung magiging role mo sa society na ginagalawan mo. So, that is my takeaway for this podcast, for this episode. And I really appreciated everyone who's tuning in right now. So, this is our week 1 of our back to school series. This is our NSTP Journal Series. And again, I will do my best to do 2 episodes every week. So, for this week, meron na tayong episode 1 and this is episode 2. And I'm looking forward to sharing to you what week 2 will look like next week. So yeah, I thank you guys for listening. And again, my name is Ken. Thank you for listening to Undeterred by Ken. And wrap.
Your stories heard. This is Undeterred. Live! Podcast streaming on Spotify, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast. Stories heard. This is Undeterred. Undeterred by Ken.